So this is your friendly neighborhood reminder that we do have the Lost Belt 4 campaign over on the NA side of things, and I know a lot of people are going to forget about this, are going to say that they don't care because, we do have stuff on JP that is pretty hype. We do have the new quote-unquote Summer BB whose details are going to be coming out within like the next week or so-ish. And so on top of that, the new MHX altar that we're getting, Talala getting a summer servant, and then the whole fact that we have no idea where the free-to-play servant is, even though they did say we should be getting it once OC3 starts properly, once we get through the summertime of the event. I do want to remind people that this is only going to be up for a couple of more days, and yes, it's just a handful of tickets to go get done, but hey, sometimes those few tickets are the difference between you pulling a unit and not pulling a unit. I have been there numerous times where I was going to go summon for Skahawk, got her on the first ticket. Morgan was back-to-back tickets when her banner initially dropped. Melusian on the JP side of things was back-to-back tickets whenever she drops. Do not discredit getting some extra tickets because every summon is going to matter when you're going for a servant that you really want, especially when we have some very powerful supports making their return at the end of the year. We're talking Oberon, we're talking Castori, we're talking Koyenskaya. And so you want to have every available ticket available to you, and then also think about those teapots. Now, those are going to be a little bit more annoying because you have to do the super version of the quest, but it's one of those things where, yes, bond farming, especially when you start getting above bond 10, does take quite a bit of time, but you want to set yourself up for success. You're not going to get to those additional bond points, those additional Saint Quartz 30 for every bond level you get higher than 10, if you're not going after these teapots. Now, not everybody's going to be able to do that because these are quite difficult to get, and these fights in particular are a bit hard to get through. I did a video a couple of days ago talking about the Immortal Team Comp. If you have that, these are, in my opinion, your best way to try to go forward and get some of these higher difficulty super recollection quests done. But even then, you gotta remember, someone like the Arjuna Altar fight can hit like an absolute truck. I'm showing first the Neza fight, and then I'm gonna show the Arjuna Altar fight afterwards. But you cannot play around in these fights. They still do some pretty good damage. And you can see I brought an MHX Altar from a friend of mine who recently NP5'd them. And because you get a 70% attack down on Neza, we weren't able to get, well, at least a consistent 3-turn clear just because it kind of came down to depending on, what crits you were getting and whatnot. But it should show that these fights are very hard. The Arjuna Altar one, it took a good couple of tries. It took a handful, even with these really cracked supports, to try to min-turn it as much as possible. Now, granted, I was also trying to use Karna for that fight. I wanted to be a bit more cinematic and use the force support, and he can do some very good damage. Obviously, your best strategy going forward for the Arjuna Altar fight is bringing Castoria, but again, unfortunately, you're locked into bringing Karna, so if you don't have her, you're going to want to focus on trying to burst this guy down as fast as possible, because he will quite easily one-shot some of your units. As you guys will see when the gameplay comes up, even with Waver's goated defensive skill, some of these guys are still just absolutely getting one-tapped by Arjuna Altar because he's quite the strong guy. He's a pretty tough cookie. And so I understand maybe not being able to do the super versions of these fights because I can't imagine being stuck any longer fighting Arjuna Altar than that 3 turns being in there. I'm obviously going to clear it and get it done because I can't be getting put on fraud watch, man. Come on now. Which will probably be something we do in the next couple of days over on stream before it disappears, but I'm gonna assure you it's gonna be very frustrating. I've already had to do this once over on the JP side of things, but it can be very frustrating because thankfully I was blessed to have Castoria and Merlin, so once I got things set up, it was relative smooth sailing, although towards that third break bar, you could still get caught by Arjuna Altar because, again, he pierces defense, and the only way to make sure you're not getting obliterated is Castoria's solemn defense, so do keep that in mind. Merlin's illusion skill is not going to work until that Pierce invincibility runs out. So you really got to be on the ball for that one. Or if you have some like ridiculous, high NP5 units, maybe they got power modded in because he is both good and evil. Then you start throwing on stuff like Fondue Chocolat, which is one of the older CEs that gives you power mod against divinity enemies. Maybe you could try to power through with that one, but I don't know how realistic that is for everybody's boxes saying, oh yeah, this guy that just has like a couple million HP, just run in there and beat that guy up. That's not going to be realistic for most Chaldean masters to get through. And so I would say for people that do have, say, more low-end boxes, maybe you're a newer master just starting out and you're like, dude, I really want to get those teapots. I want to bond 10 some of my servants, because there are some servants that have very strong bond CEs that you just want to get those, like, say, Herc or Tyra, that are pretty much built with having their bond CEs in mind because they're actually good. Go figure, every now and then Lasengal does actually make a bond CE worth using. But if you are one of those newer players and you're not able to kind of power through this, you know, you've given it like 10 plus attempts and you can't beat the Super Recollection quest, just make sure you get the tickets. Because if you secure those tickets, you give yourself a better chance of picking up better supports later on down the year. And the next time they do something like this, which I wouldn't be surprised if they said like Road to Ordeal Stall 7 or whatever, right? And then they just threw all these Ordeal call fights at us again. Or maybe they did something like this, but with events, which they've already done for a past anniversary. You'll at least be more better prepared for that because you'll have stronger servants. And you know, if you are a newer player, just don't be discouraged because you're not going to beat all the content minute one, especially when you can't cheese it by bringing a friend support. You know, going into the Neza fight, you know, for instance, you can bring whoever you want. You're not locked into bringing any specific one support. So if you have, say, decent supports on your account, like, you know, I have Caster Scotty and I have Ruler Scotty, and instead of trying to beat this normally with, say, my MHX altar, which I'm only using because she has the power mod against Neza and I wanted to use her for that, I just brought a friend. You know, I was able to find somebody that has an NP5 MHX altar and I just brought that instead, which is always going to be an option for some of these fights except for Arjuna altar, which does make him a little bit more frustrating, especially because you have to beat his to get to the tree boss fight. I understand that they want you to kind of like go through the story again in order of like these notable bosses that we fought, but you know, I think it's kind of a little frustrating that, let's say you're someone that is really good into the Neza and the tree fight, but Arjuna altar is really giving you problems. I do think that that is a little frustrating to kind of throw players at, because you know, sometimes you get down to like RNG luck fights. You know, you might have just cleared Lost Belt 4 and you got really lucky with one of your runs. You know, I think you should just be allowed to challenge whichever ones you want in whatever order you want. That's just me though. Again, hopefully this video was able to calm down some of the newer players, because I get it. I've gotten into new games before and I've seen like content that is like ridiculously good. You got to get in there because the free to play is really good, or you get some insane items like free 4 or 5 stars, but my account just wasn't up to snuff and I was not able to clear it. So believe you me, I've been there and starting other games, and I don't want people to be getting stressed out being like, oh, I can't beat this boss. Especially the like 5 million Super Recollection HP bosses over there that are still hitting ridiculously hard. You've got other options outside of people like Castoria. You could try to face tank through things. Doing like a defensive strategy is somewhat viable, although you really are, I would imagine, be kind of stressed out doing that, because once your defensive buffs are not at 100%, you're not tanking the enemy, you're probably going to get obliterated in 2.5 seconds. So if you don't have Castoria, make use of people like your waivers, your mashes, people even like Bedivere, right, that can be DPSs and provide defense to the party. Although ideally, you're going to want to go after people that have those 3-turn defensive buffs, so it's not as stressful for you to maintain those defensive buffs to make sure you don't fall below 100%. Obviously, as per usual, if you have any questions, you can go down to the Discord, which is linked down in the description down below. You can ask people about, you know, what team comps you might be able to put together to beat some of these fights. But again, do remember that not everybody's going to be able to beat these Super Recollection quests. I would say, again, especially the ones where they force you to bring a support, because there's not as much of that cheese factor in there where you can find a good servant to solo through, say, one of the harder boss fights, you know, whether it be like the tree or the Neza. You know, you can find somebody that you can use that can pretty much carry you through that fight, because you don't always have to bring a support type servant. You can bring a DPS and do your best to support that DPS. But when they're forcing you to bring a support servant, that can be a little bit frustrating, especially when Karna having the 1 guts really isn't enough. I've always found that he pretty much gets wiped no matter what I do, unless I bring Castoria specifically. And again, not everybody's got Castoria, so I can understand that being a little bit frustrating. Maybe in the future, if they want to do these, you know, memorial style fights, you know, you just remove the force support, because I've already done it once. Don't make me do it a second time. But I guess with all that being said, again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave those down in the comments down below, or feel free to join the Discord, which is in the description down below, or just find me when I'm streaming over on my Twitch, which is linked down in the description down below as well, and I will do my best to accommodate and answer your questions. If you're like, hey man, can I do it with X servant, or will X, Y, and Z team comp work? I will do the best that I can to answer those questions for you. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice one, and I'll catch y'all in the next video. Peace.